Welcome everybody to Junkman's Adventures, my next live stream here. Well, like I promised, we're going to do a carburetor stream here. Got my phone here so I can watch the chat and answer any follow-up questions you guys may have, but I got an overwhelming response to a bunch of my video, that promotion, this live stream, and I've picked out some of the best questions that I'm going to answer here live. And if any of you are watching who commented on that video, I want to let you ask some follow-up questions to get the answers you need, because I know everything regarding the carburetor. Everybody is kind of just baffled by this thing, and I want to try to help people understand it a little bit better. But before we get started, what I want you to do is, or what I want you to know is, if you tap that little dollar sign down at the bottom near the chat, that's the super chat. You can donate, and it goes to help make more streams like this, and helps me out a little bit. Of course, you never have to do that, but when you do that, it highlights your comment at the top of the chat box, and for everyone to see. And I really appreciate it if you do, but you don't have to. Just share my videos around and everything, and that'll help me out otherwise as well. Some other things is I got some other videos coming that I'm working on, some more toy restorations. So if you're into that, make sure you check those out. I have some new ones up already. If you haven't seen those, I know YouTube's notification system has not been that robust these days. You have to click subscribe, click that bell, and then even then it may or may not recommend or notify you that I got new videos out there. So just be checking my channel frequently, because I'm always going to be putting up things. And I want to do more of these live streams too, if they go well. Looks like we got a couple people in the chat here. I'm using my phone here. Oh, Jack Boot, yes. Hey, and I one of your questions we're going to get to a little bit later here, about that go-kart you have. Am I going to change my shoes like Mr. Rogers? I honestly forgot. My wife said I should do that, or I should have came in with a cardigan, and then took it off, or a sweater and whatnot. Maybe I'll have to do that the next time as kind of a running gag or something. But appreciate you watching there, Jack. But anyways, let's dive right into some of the questions here. I printed them off here, so some of the best questions here. So if you guys are watching, some of you guys that commented with some questions on the video or on my social media, I'm going to go through them here. First one came from a viewer that's a pretty engaged viewer of mine, and usually hops into these live streams. I don't see him in here yet. No Way Jerk says, hey Junkman, how can I fuel inject instead of carbonate? Food for thought. Also, how about obsolete conversions? Thanks for the thought. I think what he's asking there is kind of the difference between fuel injection and carburetors. And I mean, it's fairly obvious on the surface. Fuel injection is obviously electronic, and carburetors are all mechanical. However, what fuel injection is doing is trying to emulate the mechanicals, excuse me, of the carburetor, where a carburetor works off of pressure changes and such, and the Venturi effect. For example, this part goes to the engine. This is your air filter clamps on here, or the air box. Anyway, the air is coming through here and then coming out here. Piston going up and down over here. It's creating a vacuum as it comes down and the intake valve opens, or on a two-stroke when the piston goes down. So it's creating a negative pressure over here, which is lower than the atmospheric pressure over here. So obviously the air wants to run into the carburetor here. and then all the other mechanicals in here help direct that airflow, creates vacuum um, to push the atmosphere pushes the fuel down through and up through the jets and everything, and then obviously it comes out and atomizes and goes into the engine. Whereas a fuel injection, well, the engine is obviously still making vacuum from it going up and the piston going up and down. There's some electronics that are timing when that injector should fire, just as the timing happens automatically when that piston starts going up. Um, it's like shutting off the fuel, and when that intake valve closes, um, and then it keeps the cycle going. Well, the computer or the electronics are what's controlling the fuel injector, and it's also controlling the amount of time and everything. Fuel injection is more efficient, obviously, than a carburetor, but honestly, not by much. A well-tuned carburetor can do just as well as fuel injection. The big advantage to fuel injection is obviously when it's setting. This carburetor bowl is full of fuel, and obviously when it sits, it evaporates and then leaves a residue or gummy varnish, and then that's what clogs things up, and that's what causes a lot of havoc for most people. Whereas fuel injection doesn't really have that problem. You just have that little bit of fuel that's in the fuel line. The other obviously advantage is it can be timed, and the spray can be directly atomized. With the fuel injection, obviously you can use a computer and such and control it. Just a lot more controllability of it, where the carburetor is a little more simple in that fact. But I would almost say the carburetor can be a lot more reliable because you don't have a lot of those electronics, and water can be a problem with electronics and such, where the carburetor, obviously you don't want to get water in the fuel, but short of this carburetor body being damaged, it's more than likely going to work all the time. So anyway, I think that kind of covers that little question there. We can circle around back to that if you want to. The next one I wanted to go along, this is a specific by, it's from Guillermo Bonfiglio. I'm probably not pronouncing that name correctly. It says, hi, I'm tuning up a 754 K4. That's a Honda. That would be 1973 or probably 1973. Honda 754. Everything seems okay. Jets, float, needle levels, synchronizing that, but it fails when passing from idling to middle throttle or at a constant speed below 3,000 RPM. The translation there is not quite right, so I'm going to have to kind of guess what you're asking. I think you're getting a little bit of a bog off throttle, which can be common. Can kind of be common. It's usually caused by a lean condition. Usually, richening up the pilot jet can help, but that may mean that you're not using a quality fuel. Somewhere else in the fuel system is starving it for fuel. For example, the fuel shutoff. We'll talk about this a little bit later. Could be clogged and not providing adequate fuel. Valve adjustments can cause that, so that's more of a mechanical thing. So that can masquerade as carb problems. Sometimes your valve adjustment and even the cam timing, if the cam chain is a little bit sloppy or is loose, meaning you need to tighten those tensioners on there, that can kind of cause that problem there too. So it's a little hard to determine from what you're asking, but if it sounds like your carbs are in pretty good shape, or what you're doing there. We got them synchronized because that has 4 carburetors, that bike, and your jets and needles and things. If they're set to the factory and you're having this problem, You may have a vacuum leak from the intake manifolds or the carb holders. Um, that can kind of be hard to diagnose. That'd be first things to check there, and then look alongside of like mechanicals like valve adjustments and such. So we got another question here. Goodfella 21F. Hey Junkman, I have a 2003 Suzuki Katana. It's got 9,000 miles only, but it's been sitting covered in my garage for about 4 years now. Do you believe the carb is gunked up on it, or will it be okay? Well, that kind of depends. I haven't seen it, but more than likely, just based on my experiences, yes. Uh, you're going to need to take the tank off, clean the tank off well, clean the tank out well. Probably replace fuel lines because they're probably a little bit hard and rotten. Also, the fuel shutoffs, it'll have something like this. As you can see, this is brand new one. Brand new one. They have these little screen kind of pre-filter type things, and obviously, when it's in the on position, this is on. This is off on this kind of type, and your bike would have a similar type setup too. But these can clog with debris just from the tank, and gum and varnish can gum these up or gum up inside here where this part rotates. And there's small passages in here where the fuel has to flow out to then eventually go to the carburetor. So this is an often overlooked part on the in the fuel system. Most people just think, oh well, I can turn the lever and it works, or they pull the hose off and some fuel drips out, but maybe it's not enough. It should kind of stream out of here. So you're gonna need to clean this out. You're gonna need to clean the tank, place your fuel lines, add fuel filters if you can. Not all bikes, you can. And then yes, you're gonna want to just open them carburetors up and clean them out because yes, you could probably put fuel in it and see if it fire, and it may fire and it may run. However, it may not, or it'll run very poorly, and then you're just taking this stuff apart. And if the tank is relatively empty as it sits, that's less fuel you got to drain out. Open the cap and smell it. You'll be able to tell what rotten fuel smells like in 4 years. It'll be rotten. So I wouldn't even try to put fresh gas in it and go. You got to start from scratch. And I know it sounds daunting, but it really isn't. Because if you just take your time, get a service manual. If you can get a hold of the service manual, you can. It'll walk you through all this, and then obviously you can check the different settings and everything too, as well, just to make sure it's all good to go. So before even trying to start it, I just clean the fuel system out. There's a couple other things you ought to do with a bike that's been sitting for 4 years as well, but fuel system's the main thing. Okay, the next one is from, the username is called Unknown. I don't know if that's intentional or that's just YouTube. Anyway, I have a Pulsar 200 NS carburetor version. I have put a K&N filter and free flow exhaust for performance, and also upjetted the main from 115 to 117.5. But now my bike would fully warms up. The RPM when I pull the clutch remain at 2,500 RPM, and then slowly drops to idle, which is 1,500 RPM. I tried to adjust the AFR ratio, but the bike ideal RPM idle RPM slightly fluctuates. Please help. Please help. I should the AFR more rich or lean or anything else? Please help. Okay, I had to research a little bit ahead of time. This is a bike that is not available in the U.S., so I'm not directly familiar with it, but it just looks like it's a small displacement 200cc single. Pretty cool looking bike, actually. Looks like it's maybe only available in like India and such. Anyways, you're kind of on the right track there. Putting the K&N air filter and a free full exhaust, obviously you're those are two modifications that allow more air to come in and exit the engine. However, what happens in between those didn't change, so you're going to need to adjust the carburetor, and you're on the right track about adding more fuel in terms of the main jet to that 117 and a half, up from 115. Now, thing I don't know from your question here is, with the stock filter, stock exhaust, and a 115 main jet, did it run just perfectly and not have this kind of problem? I'm going to make the assumption it did. So, based on that information, that kind of hanging idle, that is due to a lean condition in the pilot circuit. So, probably going to need to try upping that pilot jet, the next step, whatever it is. You didn't let me know here. And then you're going to have to adjust whichever your carburetor has, either a fuel screw, which is on this end, or an air screw, which will be somewhere towards this end, and then retweak that just a little bit. But you're running just a little bit lean on the pilot circuit is kind of why that is, because in this case, once the main jet is closed, it can only run off of what it's getting from the pilot jet. And if it's not getting enough fuel with the pilot jet, the engine's going to kind of race and kind of hunt for that idle, because it's trying to suck more fuel than it can get through that small little jet there. So that's probably your issue there. That's where I would at least start with. And then then you can kind of tune from there. My other carburetor jetting tutorial video will kind of break down the different steps there as well. So that might help you out. So if you see this, you might try that. And the last one, which I know he's in the chat right now, for those of you watching archived, Jack Boot says, I just bought a Mikuni 20mm carb and a high-flow air pod to put on a Predator 212cc go-kart motor. It has a header as well. What influence and power would that have versus the stock go-kart carb, which would be similar to a snowblower carb? You posted a picture on, I believe, my website or my Facebook page, I can't remember, of your go-kart. And looking at that engine, that's like kind of like a lawnmower engine, sort of. Typical, outdoor power equipment type engine. And you've swapped out the kind of just the stock carburetor for this 22 Mikuni. Well, really the Achilles heel you have with your setup here is really the engine itself, or actually the design of the engine. I am not 100% sure, because I didn't look too closely, if that was a older like flathead style motor, or if that's one that does have the overhead valve. The overhead valve is better, but you're still limited by just those engines just have the manufacturing tolerances are not great, so your intake port and your exhaust port, your flow characteristics are not ideal. Putting on carburetor and a pod and then a header obviously is going to help a little bit, but it's going to increase. You're going to probably get a little more torque out of the thing. You're probably not necessarily notice. It ain't going to notice much power. And with those kind of go-karts, a lot of it comes down to getting those centrifugal clutch springs right. So if you are messing around with that, you might play with that. But what I would do is, if you're handy enough and you have a die grinder and such, pull that head off and take your carburetor or intake manifold and just at least port match it to the gasket or the carburetor here into the head. That'll help. If you can kind of if there is a little bit of a radius into the cylinder from your intake port, you can kind of, and you may not be able to reach in there with a tool. If you can reshape that radius and kind of make it a little more direct, so it doesn't have to go like that as much, and it's a little more gentle. Uh, that'll help the flow a little bit, and that'll actually help tuning with this, because usually when you put a bigger carburetor on, like you just did, I into a smaller intake. Well, you have that bigger carburetor going into that smaller intake, now you're increasing the velocity in there, and that's a good thing. But with that larger, you're shoving that much more fuel and air in there. It can have a chance to kind of pool, and then you get kind of a not a very clean running engine that way, because it can kind of load up at lower RPMs. It's great for high RPM, but you kind of sacrifice some down low. Now on the exhaust side, port match it to that header coming out of the exhaust port, and then if you want to spend some time, start with like an 80 grit cross buff or something in there, and try and polish up that exhaust port as best you can, make it as shiny as you can to help smooth out the airflow coming out. Now you don't want to polish on the intake. You want to leave that sort of rough, because that's what keeps the fuel atomized with the air. It seems kind of counterintuitive, but an old hot rodder told me that, and that's what I've always done. So anyway, with that motor, your Achilles heel is really the head design on there is just poor, because they're not really designed for performance. They're just designed for ease of manufacture and longevity and reliability. So do that, and I bet you'll actually notice a pretty good gain, especially in your upper RPMs once that clutch is fully engaged and you're on the throttle. But like I said, you've probably read all about kind of tuning those centrifugal clutches with those go-kart carbs. So anyway, those were some good questions. Those are the main ones I wanted to go over here. But I also wanted to get into a little bit, because a lot of people are always asking about jetting. I made mention of some things, going richer or leaner, and I have this little thing sitting here now. I've had this. It says it was printed. I had to look it up. It says it was printed in 1991. I've had it a long time. It's a little piece of cardboard thing. It's a Mycooty branded, but little pocket tuner. And really, it's been very handy for me learning how to tune carburetors by using this thing, because on this little piece of cardboard, it has a lot of information. I mean, it has on the back, kind of tells you where what settings are in operation, and what throttle openings and everything, which all this is on my website as well. It has some basic symptoms and maybe what to look for. So for example, symptoms of an engine condition being too rich. Here's what it says: performance is flat, it's not crisp, condition is worse when engine is hot, condition is worse when the choke or starter, that's this little lever here, it's worse when it's on. Dark or fouled spark plug, that seems pretty obvious. Removal of the air cleaner helps. So if it seems to run better with no air cleaner, which you should never do, obviously that is a good sign that you're running rich in some respect. Exhaust popping or backfire. Engine sound is dull, which that's kind of suggestive. Exhaust popping or backfire. You may even see some black puffs of like carbon, real dry carbon coming out the back. That's where the engine's run so rich that it's combusting in the exhaust system, and of course not completely burning. So you're actually getting the soot from the burnt gases blowing out the exhaust. That's kind of more of a real extreme condition. But symptoms of an engine condition that's too lean. Acceleration is poor. It kind of surges. We kind of went over that with one of the viewers' questions there. Performance improves slightly as engine warms. Better performance when the starter or choke is used. which a lot of people must not understand really what this lever is. In this case, this would not be a choke. It's an enrichment, or what they call starter. It opens a port to allow more fuel in, basically to richen up the mixture for cold starting. A choke is just a butterfly valve that shuts off the air. In this case, you're just adding more fuel and then shutting it off for cold starting, and that's what that means. So yeah, if your overall mixture is too lean and turning the choke on a little bit, or that enrichment makes it better, well, obviously that means your main jet or something is too lean. No color or overheated spark plug electrode. If it's real burnt whitish and extra clean, I mean, looks almost new. A proper spark plug should kind of have just a brown like coffee stain look to it, I guess, on the porcelain. So if this is real white, and if you've been running it and detonating a little bit, you may even see a little aluminum flecks, which that's actually parts of the top of the pistons that's eroding away, and that's really bad. You don't want to be running that too long. Removal of air cleaner makes condition worse. That's obvious because you're allowing more air through the carburetor, and if you're already lean and you're adding more, you're leaning it out even more. Let's see, popping back through the carburetor. A lot of people comment on this, and that's again another lean condition when you let off the throttle or whatnot, or you're holding it wide open and it's going rah, 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 and then it's backfiring through the carburetor out this end. That means you're too lean, so you need to richen up things a little bit there. Let's see, engine pings or knocks, excessive engine heat. That, I guess I kind of touched on that. If it sounds kind of like a little hammering sound, pinging or a ringing sound, it's not like knock like that, but you know it when you hear it, and that's definitely you're too lean. And like I said, if the engine seems to be, as it warms up, it seems like it loses power, you're running too lean. Now, that's just in general here. Now, you'll still have to investigate, where is it running lean? Is it on the lower end at 0 1/4 throttle? Are we half to 3/4, or is this only at full throttle? And that's where you need to watch my carbureting jetting tutorial video, because it kind of goes over which adjustments you should adjust for each throttle opening, and that's where testing and tuning comes in. But anyway, that's on the back of this, and for most people, that's going to take care of, or at least get them in the right way. The other thing, and it works kind of as a slide rule here. The other thing, this is for tuning when the temperature changes or your altitude changes. So for like the broad range of altitudes I ride at, everything from like 1,500 feet up to almost 13,000 feet, this comes in real handy, so I can get a good idea of what jet I should change. So my baseline elevation, for my baseline elevation, I jet the carburetor appropriately. So let's just take an example here. It'll probably be hard for you to see, but let's just leave it in the middle here. So for example, let's just say my optimal jetting for my altitude right now is a 150 main jet. All right, and that's at a normal temp. Say like it's 70 degrees. Let's just say it's going to be 60 degrees at the same altitude. You just minus 10, minus 20, 3, 4, and going down the line, you leave the 150 on 0, and then look at where it tells you, okay, as the temperature drops, because the air temperature is colder, you're going to need more fuel. So obviously it's telling you to increase the jet size, and then as the temperature gets warmer, just as we learned from some of our symptoms here, you're going to lean it out, and it tells you about where to go. That's for temperature. Now, we'll leave it on 150, and let's say we're going to, you know, go up 2,000 feet, 4,000, 8,000 feet. You know, tells me how many jet sizes and what jet I should put in. This only works if you have your baseline jetting correct. It's not to tell you what the baseline should be. You have to work off of the baseline jetting, and that's where testing and tuning at your normal elevation at normal temperatures that you normally ride at is real crucial. Get that dialed in. Then you can use something like this, and this I believe is available online too. Just Google it. Then you can use this to then determine, you know, what jet you need to change. Should you be going way up high in the mountains or going way down to sea level? And then when you get there, your bike should just run pretty much as it does at your normal elevation or normal temperature rate. So this has been a handy thing for me also, you know, when I've been teaching myself how to tune carburetors. It also has a little bit of information about the different type, but since it's my Cooney type jets, you know, there's more than just that. But it also tells you how to use it on here. So, you know, I might have a part number for this, and if I do, it's not printed on here, but I have the original packaging for it. But anyway, that's something if you're getting serious about learning how to tune, something like that might be something you want to look at. Looks like we got some other comments here. What do we got? Oh, Furworks has hopped in here. Hey, Jackman, we're in the middle of recording a bunch of videos, but wanted to stop in for a minute while you were live. Yep, yarn videos. Yeah, well, this is way off topic. I got a fellow YouTuber, him and his girlfriend, I believe girlfriend, he does all the videography, and she does crocheting and such, and they're doing yarn videos. So Furworks YT is his channel, and I think it is, I forget what her channel is off the top of my head. Anyway, I know it's something in crafting. Oh darn, I'm off topic now. But anyway, go check it out. They're kind of really neat. They're very well done videos. But anyway, just wanted to give a shout out to a YouTuber just because he popped in the chat here. But all right, off topic again. Let's see. Let's get to these fuel shutoffs. I did talk a little bit about this one here, and I'll just go over it a little bit. Most people understand, well, maybe understand how these work. So, for example, you know, this position's off, this position's on, this position's reserve. And what does that mean, on and reserve? A lot of people, I don't think, because they've never seen them out of the tank, understand. Well, this is mounted up under the tank, and this little dip tube here is up here. So when the fuel level comes down, it can only come to here, and you're out of fuel. Then when you switch it to reserve, it allows it to take fuel from here. So depending on how big your tank is, you have at least this much fuel, which usually equates to about half a gallon for most motorcycles. And with most motorcycles getting around that 40 mile per gallon range, you know, it's going to get you 20 miles. Surely you can find a gas station within about 20 miles is kind of the idea here. But for you vintage guys out there, they're new to vintage bikes, these can cause all sorts of problems because these are plastic. And after 30, 40, 50 years, depending on how old the bike is, these are deteriorated and they collapse and they just gum up and then don't allow sufficient amounts of fuel to flow through here. Also, there's tiny little orifices in here that direct the fuel from either here to here to come out the outlet. And so you need to take these two little screws off. Taking these two little screws off, there's a little O-ring or sometimes a gasket behind here. Those get brittle, and then you have a leak here. So for vintage guys, these can be very temperamental. Fortunately, they're usually fairly universal. This is a fairly common one with this kind of mounting like this. So you can usually find something off of a more modern bike to swap out so you can have a brand new one. I have a couple other ones over here that are obviously older, and they'll show you what I mean. For example, this one is stuck. I need to take this one apart. This one actually has a sediment bowl here, which is kind of nice. You can take it off here, and kind of acts as a fuel filter. And as always, you can see kind of, maybe the camera's not focusing, you can kind of see it's kind of dirty and gummy in there. There's a little screen in there. You got to take these apart, clean them out real good. As you can see here, this one's missing the screen on this tube, this in here, and it's real gummy in there. So a good soaking, disassembly and soaking before you would even try to put fuel through something like this needs to happen. That's a case of a pretty extreme one. This is same kind of deal. Actually, I have this with half a part. You can see this is where the lever will go on this one, and you can see there's 4 holes. This is pretty common. And this rubber part, it's real hard. This is pretty common size. There's only about like 2 or 3 different sizes. So if you can figure out another bike that has one and get a rebuild kit, that's how you can do those. This one, obviously, same thing. This one's, the plastic's about broke. So like I said, this one needs a lot of work before we could even try and put it on the bike. And then this here, there's another thing. Usually found on street bikes or older Japanese enduros, you know, street and trail type bikes. This is a vacuum diaphragm. This one's broken off, but there should be a port here that would go to the engine. So when the engine's running, it's pulling a vacuum on this, and then it opens the diaphragm to let the fuel through. And then when the engine's off, obviously, there's a spring that closes it. So it's kind of like an automatic on-off deal. There's a lot of reasonings behind it. Probably one thing is kind of about safety, like if you crash and laid over the bike and the engine quits, it'll shut the fuel off. Part of it, I think, is also so people don't have to remember to turn it on and off overnight, because these don't always seal the best, and overnight sometimes they can flood the carburetor. So I think they came up with this idea, design-wise engineers, to kind of alleviate some of those problems for people who can't remember to turn their fuel off, or like I said, possibly a safety thing for on the road. Like I said, it shuts the fuel off if the engine quits, just to hopefully minimize fire risk. It's probably, but problem with this is that diaphragm in there goes bad, and then it leaks, and then you leak out here, or it leaks back through the vacuum port right into the cylinder, and then you can hydrolock your engine. So I kind of have a love-hate relationship with these. If they're new and in good shape and you can get them, I replace them. If not, if it's hard, like this one is probably going to be difficult, I will probably try to adapt a different shutoff if I'm not going for a factory accurate restoration. But again, when you're messing with a bike that's been sitting, don't even try to put fuel through them. You need to take those apart and make sure. Let's check our comments here. What do we got? Basically, your old school gas gauge, he says. We're talking about the Petcock. Yeah, I mean, and bikes to this day still kind of use that use that idea, you know. But but yeah, that's your when your engine. He says when your engine dies, that's when it's time to pull over. Yeah. So you're running on, it runs out, and the engine starts sputtering. It's like, well, reach down, turn it to reserve, and it should keep going. But that means you better be finding a gas station pretty quick. So, anyways, that's kind of the basics of the fuel system and the carburetor and all this that I wanted to talk about. You know, and I try to respond to every comment on my videos, asking questions about these. I seem to get a lot of these similar questions over and over and over, and that's why I wanted to kind of do this in a live stream. I may make a separate video that kind of breaks this out, but I kind of covered most of the down and dirty. I find more often than not people's carburetor troubles, when they determine it's a fuel system trouble, and they think it's a carburetor, it's almost always down to dirt in the carburetor, or and they clean it. They say they cleaned it, but just like in this example here, you know, there's just this little bit of varnish in there that they may miss and everything. Well, the fresh fuel in there dissolves it, and then it gets sucked up in there, and then it clogs the jet. So it may have been clean at one time, and same with gunk in the tank, especially with old bikes and old rusty tanks. Clean them out well. Well, some rust that you couldn't get cleaned out may still fall in there. That's why after you get an old bike running, even if you clean that tank out, you need to run it around for some tests, run the fuel tanks, fuel through it, just to kind of rule out these things. But you know what? Plastic tanks aren't immune to this either, especially on new bikes, because from the manufacturing, when they cut the threads on the screw-on filler caps, sometimes some of those old plastic shavings get down in there, and usually they just sit in the bottom of the tank and don't harm anything. But then, and because of these screens, they generally don't get past there. But sometimes they break down, they get gooey, and they'll get in there, and then they'll clog up something here. And that may not happen for years. So just because you got a plastic tank, you don't have to necessarily worry, especially if it's a brand new bike and you're putting the first tank of fuel. A lot of times I would take, it was a big problem with those Chinese pit bikes, is they would always have, just from manufacturing swarf, you could call it, in the tanks. Swish around some gasoline there and dump it out and wash some of that stuff out. Did wonders for not running some of those little plastic parts through there. Let's see. Got some other people here in the chat here just popped in. Let's see. Gasket gas bled out pressure. Anthony R. Not sure what you're saying there. Oh, no way. If only the fuel gets emptied for the season end, life would be so easy. Yeah. Using a fuel stabilizer is also a good thing to do. I do that myself. That doesn't guarantee you still can't have problems in the future, but yeah, that's something to use to think about fuel stabilizers. And actually, contrary to popular belief, storing a bike full of fuel is actually better than no fuel, because you have all that airspace, and then condensation can sit in there. And then, of course, that layer of water sits on top of the gas there, and then you dump fresh gas in there, you got water into gas. That's also a problem that happens. But it also, can speed up the rusting of the insides of the tank. So, there's some of those fuel stabilizers out there that claim to kind of protect that. I know Stable 360, that product. I use that. I can't say it's the end-all be-all for that, but I guess what I'll say here is something is better than nothing when it comes to that. So, Anthony R. says 6 months stored. Yeah, 6 months probably. The gas is going to be bad after 6 months. The fuel we have today, I don't care whether it's ethanol or non-ethanol, and I don't want to get into a debate on that in this. But either or, you're pushing it. You're pushing 3 months, and you're really pushing it. 2 really, and you're pushing it with today's gasoline the way it is. But that's why any kind of fuel stabilizer, I don't care what your brand is, use something. It'll help you in the long run. Unknown. Oh, hey, hello. I didn't know if that was your username, so thanks for joining me. I answered your question earlier. If you missed it, check out when this stream is archived, you'll be able to see what I said. Answered there. Let's see. See, no one here says I have some stable, but no one uses it. I don't know what you mean. Um, like I said, I use it all the time. I got a couple other fuel stabilizer brands that I use. I don't really care. I use either or. I just know that they have that one 360 product that's supposed to be. I don't know. Somehow I don't know. Somehow it works better according to them. Storing it full of fuel also lets you know that you have a leak when you come out at the end and it's empty. Yeah, that's true. Um, I typically drain mine and dry them out for long term storage. But you know what? I'd be lying if I said that I did that with everything. My outdoor power equipment, fill them up, fuel stabilizers. Generally, never had a problem. Um, and that goes for chainsaws and those kind of things. My motorcycles, generally drain them. Some of my bikes I do ride during the winter, so they do get fuel consistently ran through them. And that's another way you can kind of do it is you just keep fuel going through them. You don't have as much you won't have as much problem with that as fuel storage. It says I recently went to a different gas station. There's like 5 kinds of gas out there now. Well, there's more than 5 kinds of gas. I know in the area of the country I'm in, there's at least 300 different blends that just in this state alone. So there's, and it's winter blends and all this. It's hard to get good, consistent fuel, I guess, unless you're running race gas, But most people don't have the need for that. Anthony R. Drainage hose from not having fuel in it does not cause damage. I'm not sure what you're asking there, so could you kind of revise your question there? I'll try and answer it, but I don't understand what you're asking there. But anyway, what do we got? You run synthetic fuel in your chainsaws, weed eater, never had any more issues, but it's expensive. You're talking synthetic oil in your mix and such, and you're probably using that. Yeah. If you use like kind of like those fuel in a can you can buy on the hardware store and stuff. Yeah. I can see that. And Furwork says, "Are you asking if the hoses dry out, Anthony?" Okay, that's probably what that's probably what he meant. Fuel lines, if they're good quality fuel lines, no, they won't. Obviously, fuel lines, I don't care. I bought the quality and I bought the junk. The junk does not last. The quality stuff does last, but they don't last forever either. I typically have to replace my fuel lines on some motorcycles about every 5 years. It seems like. Because they degrade in the sun, the UV light too. That's another part. If they're protected, they last a lot longer. But like on my motorcycle cross bike and stuff, where they get exposed to UV light a lot, obviously because they're very exposed, I have to replace those more frequently than other motorcycles, of course. Norway jerks. Snow on the pump, fine kinds, and regular plus high. Okay. You're talking about that, like 85, 89, or 87, 89, 91, 94. Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, and if you're in the right part of the country, you can also get certain off-road fuels at the pump as well. And Anthony R is confirming not having fuel in the line. I mean, fuel is going to degrade the line too. Even like I said, even with proper fuel lines, they don't last forever. Like in cars and such, everything's going to fail at one point or another. That's why a lot of people who buy cars that have sat for a long time generally, they run good for a while, then they'll start having these kind of issues and have fuel line issues because rubber parts just don't last. I don't care what they are. Generally more natural rubbers in them, but the longer they typically will last, but they have to have other or more natural rubber, the more carbon, the longer they'll last. But like I said, the fuel is corrosive no matter what it is, whether it's regular, ethanol blends, methanol, uh, whatever, avgas, whatever. Uh, but probably the best thing you can do is drain all the fuel if you can. That's because if no fuel is there, it can't evaporate and it can't leave the heavy particles that make up the fuel, and then that leaves what looks like varnish or what's called varnish in the carburetor, and that's what clogs your jets. Uh, Says I have some 3/8 line that has a blue plastic liner inside, and it's pain to get on, but it's lasted a long time. Yeah, that's I know what you're talking about. That's one of the more quality lines out there. But like I said, I've used all different brands and all different kinds, and generally the more higher quality, the more expensive, you do actually get what you pay for there, and get a little longer life. But then again, like with weed whackers and stuff like that, I've had to replace fuel lines every couple of years because it just for some reason it doesn't seem like I can find a very good quality line. Either they don't sell at the hardware store or even online I can't find something that's any better than what was ever in there. So that's just kind of par for the course, I think, a little bit. Uh, and then no way talking was all they had $5 for it, I think. Oh, you're talking about that fuel line, yeah. Um, and yeah, that small motorcycle fuel line can kind of be a little pricey in my opinion, for what it is. But I guess because motorcycling is fairly niche, they can charge. They can charge for that. But well, anyway, I was gonna try to keep this to about an hour. We're running up on about an hour here. Unless you got some other comments or questions, I think I'm going to kind of wrap this up. And hey, if you guys enjoyed this, leave a like on this. You can quickly support me in the super chat if you wanted to, or just go watch one of my other videos and let it play in the background because YouTube. Really likes the watch time. That helps promote my videos, and it doesn't cost you anything. Just let it run in the background. Put one of my playlists on and just let it run. That's a way you can kind of support me because I want to do more of these live streams, but they ain't free. Internet ain't free, and it does cost me a little bit, and not only in my time and whatever, and so I sure appreciate you guys watching and commenting and interacting, and let me know in the future what other kind of topics you'd like me to cover. What are the things you'd like to see or talk about in these kind of live streams? If you just want to kind of do more of a hangout, and we'll take topics on anything because it doesn't have to be motorcycle related. I like pop culture stuff. I like making and building things, so we could talk a little bit about that kind of stuff. Uh, if those are some kind of things some of you guys watching would like to know about, or I could tell some stories, just kind of my experiences with things. Because, like I said, I like when I was explaining this thing. This here helped teach me how to jet my motorcycle. I didn't just come into this earth knowing how to do some of this stuff, and I like to do these live streams and these videos to help you guys along, help spread the knowledge, And I'm always watching other guys' videos, learning from them, and I pick up things. So I really appreciate it, and I think yeah, we're running up on about an hour, and I think that's about all I really got. So I really appreciate you watching. Make sure you've hit that subscribe button. You probably have if you're in here, but also hit that bell notification so it emails you and notifies you when I put up a new video. Because I'm going to try to pump out some more content here. Want to do some more other things. I got more toy restorations and maybe even some farming videos. I got some of that content I need to get put together. So I don't have much else. So appreciate you watching, and see you next time. Thanks.